This is good old boy Mike from Sips, Suds, and Smokes podcast, and you're listening to Pop Goes Your World.
If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes. And while you're there, please leave us a rating and review.
And now it's time for our featured presentation.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 289, TV cooking shows. Chris McBrien along with Derek Myers, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. Now, this week we're taking a look at TV cooking shows, and who better to join us to talk about them than our old friend, fellow podcaster, and Chopped contestant himself, Mr. Robert Rose. Robbie, welcome back to the show. Oh my gosh, yes, listen. Oh man, welcome back. You joined us previously to do the Mighty Ducks. It's nice to have you back.
Yeah, it is great to be here. And now that I've finished my night in the kitchen, I can crack one and start to really enjoy it. I actually, speaking of being on the last time, guys, yeah. I went and picked some stuff up today, and I was wearing some Anaheim Ducks shorts, but obviously with the original logo, like the Mighty Ducks. Nice. And the guy stopped me and said, "Hey, those are some cool shorts," and then asked me randomly, "What's my favorite sports movie?" And I'm like, "What's going on? Am I on the podcast right now? Is this part of Pop Goes Your World?" So anyway, it was a great interaction to lead into, being on with you guys tonight. It's so nice to be back with you.
Oh man, we love having you. Now, before we jump in around here, we like to talk a little bit about sort of what we've done in the world of pop culture. So Derek, do you want to kick us off here? What have you been able to take in over the last couple weeks? Because we were away last week.
Yeah, well, part of the reason we were away was that I was on vacation. And normally when I'm on vacation, I have a lot of downtime and I get to watch a whole bunch of stuff and I listen to a whole bunch of podcasts and audiobooks. But I was on a cruise with my family, so I didn't really have a lot of downtime. And you may not know this about me, but when I travel, I sleep like a rock. So even the plane flights, I had all this stuff ready and I just put my head down and slept through the flight. So I didn't get a chance to really take in that much, but I did have a chance to bring in a couple of things. So the first one I got was a new stand-up comedy show on Netflix from comedian Jimmy Carr called Natural Born Killer. Jimmy Carr is a British comedian. He's got a very distinct laugh. It's like it goes, ha, ha. So people may not know his name, but they've seen him when they know his bits. And he's pretty offside. He does a lot of stuff that's well over the line. And I find his stuff really funny, even though some of it is probably a little cringy. So it was really good. It was a new one from him. So if you like his stuff, definitely check that out on Netflix.
I'll have to just check it out just for that laugh. If it sounds like that, it sounds like some kind of exotic bird or something.
It's incredibly unique, guys. Yeah, like Derek knows. It is like it's a one-off laugh. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's been doing successful stand-up for like 20 or 25 years. So there's a very good chance most people have seen some of his bits, even if it's just on TikTok or YouTube or something. But the other thing I had a chance to watch was there's a series with David Letterman on Netflix called My Next Guest with David Letterman. And he interviews people. I watched one a while back where he interviewed President Barack Obama. And
yes, I saw that.
He gets a wide variety of people. So he has a new one that just came out, and he interviews another stand-up comedian, John Mulaney, who also recently put out a Netflix special. And part of why Mulaney's in the spotlight is he had a very public meltdown to do with drugs, and he had to go into rehab, and it was a very big deal. And so his new stand-up special that came out a few months back is all about him reflecting back on his drug use and his rehab, and it's a very like telling and very personal set of jokes that he does. And so David Letterman had him on, and they talked about, his career, but they really focused on his recent stand-up bit and how, as a comedian, it was therapeutic for him. And it was really good. If you're a fan of Mulaney and you're a fan of David Letterman, it was really good. It only ran about like 45 minutes. So it was a good one to watch. I think I watched it at the airport before I got on the plane, because I knew by the time I hit the plane, I'd be asleep. And then the last thing I had a chance to watch was an animated show called Invincible. It's on Amazon. Season 2, the last few episodes dropped. They did one of those stupid things where they were dropping it one a week, But they divided the 8 episodes into 2 4-episode sort of season, half season, which is a huge pain in the butt. So anyway, the second half of the second season dropped about a month ago, and I was literally saving it for this trip. So I had a chance to finish watching the last 4 episodes, and it's an incredible show. It's the guy who created, it's based on a comic book, and the guy who created it is the same guy that created the original Walking Dead comic book. And yeah, no, it's really good. So if you've had a chance to check out Invincible season 1, you haven't checked out season 2, I would strongly encourage you to do so, because it was quite good. So three winners for me this week.
Nice, all good. And how about you, Robbie? Anything new and exciting you've been able to take in recently?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to find time to sit down with my wife to watch series, and I'm sure this happens to a lot of people, where you start watching and then you look over and, you know, either they're asleep or they tell you fell asleep, and at some point
I'm not the only one this happens to, thank goodness.
Yeah, at some point there's a level of frustration in which one person, usually me, just watches the whole damn thing and then says, you should watch it, it is good. So that happened with the series Baby Reindeer on Netflix, which is like pseudo documentary. I didn't want to say I watched a documentary. I mean, I wanted to say I watched a documentary, but I didn't actually. But the guy that stars in it was the person involved in the story, and it was some freaky, fascinating stuff. That one was good. Also on Netflix, some easy goes down easy stuff on Unfrosted with Jerry Seinfeld and a million other comedians. You know, it was about the invention of Pop-Tarts, you know, satirical comedy, funny, whatever. It was all right. And then also Fallout, which was or is on Amazon. And that's an interesting one. I thought it was one thing, and it wasn't. It was a completely different show.
No spoilers, Robbie. I'm still working my way through it.
I will not spoil, but this was the classic case of started watching with my wife. She fell asleep. The next day she said, "You finished the 4th episode?" I'm like, well, I was up, you know, and I'll come home from work some nights and I'm wired. So I'm not ready to fall asleep. And the first night we started watching, I ended up going through, you know, multiple hours worth of it before I was ready to calm down. And it is interesting. I won't spoil, Derek, anything for it other than which, have you watched any of it? Have you watched 4 minutes of it?
I think I'm
then
3 or 4 episodes in.
Yeah, okay. So the gore level was higher than I personally thought, but that's because I thought it was a story where people were in a time capsule and generations passed, and then they came up to the world, and it was going to be exploring the world. But it's not that, and I won't say more. It's pseudo that. Either way, that was neat. I also randomly through the Tubi app watched Three Amigos,
nice.
Just because I listened to Steve Martin and Martin Short on Smartless podcast, which is, you know, not as good as yours, of course, but they were celebrating their 200th episode, and they had those guys on, and they talked about Three Amigos. I'm like, oh man, like I have not watched that movie in I don't know how long, and it was one of the ones that you would watch on, you know, cable of bits and bobs between, you know, you pick it up at a commercial and then watch it to the end kind of thing. So I watched that one, and then I watch a lot of YouTube guys. I bought an old truck 2 years ago. I've been working hard to fix it. I am a YouTube mechanic. If I don't know how to fix something, YouTube will probably roughly kind of sort of walk me through it. And then after I reach a high enough level of frustration, I'll watch a different YouTube video that may or may not help me. So I watch different guys like Vice Grip Garage and things like that to learn, because I enjoy learning while I'm watching. But that's it for me.
Oh, nice. Lots of stuff. Oh, I got one for you guys. So I've mentioned this before. I'm a huge fan of the Bare Naked Ladies. And I mean the band, of course. I also like Bare Naked Ladies, but I'm a big fan of the band. And I've introduced their music to my kids. I mean, I've been a fan of theirs since the 80s when they first, you know, came out in the late 80s. But introduced the music to my kids, and my youngest son especially really, really likes them a lot. Like, and he likes a lot of their newer stuff. Like, they just came out with an album in September of 2023, and his favorite song is from that album. So he likes the old stuff too. But, you know, like, we get together, like, just the other night I was making dinner, and he walks into the kitchen. He's like, "Can I help you make dinner, Daddy?" I'm like, "Sure." And he's like, "Hold on." And he goes and gets his iPad, and he puts on Spotify and plays, like, Bare Naked Ladies songs. And we're singing along to all the lyrics and stuff. So we really like it. So the other day I pick him up from school on the Thursday, and he's like, why is everybody picking me up? Because usually I pick them up alone, and there's like me, my wife, my other son. Why are we all here? Don't worry, we're going for a drive. And I live in Barrie, Ontario, so we're driving down to Toronto. We get to Toronto. He's like, we're going to somewhere in Toronto? No, don't worry about it. We just keep driving. We get to Burlington. We get to Hamilton. We get to St. Catharines. It's like 2.5 hours away. He's like, where the hell are we going? Don't worry about it. We get to St. Catharines. We pull up to the arena there, and I'm not telling my kids what we're doing. And they're like, oh, we're going to watch a hockey game? I'm like, not exactly. We walk into the arena. We get floor seats. We sit down, and the Bare Naked Ladies come out on stage and do a concert. I surprised them with this concert, and they freaked. They just thought it was so great. So we watched the whole concert. We're singing along to the songs. We're just having such a great time. And then the Bare Naked Ladies get done, and they go off. And my youngest son looks up at me, and he's quite upset. He's like, Daddy, they didn't play my favorite song. I'm like, well, you know, they can't play them all. And that is like from their new album, so they're probably not going to play it. They're going to play all their old hits, right? So I'm like, it's just the way it is. I said, but you know, knowing how concerts work, of course, the lights are still off. So I said to him, hey, I'll tell you what do you say we clap really, really loud? Maybe they'll come back out and sing another song. You know, maybe they'll do that for us. So everybody's clapping like crazy. They come out for their encore. But before they come out for their encore, all these people start walking out on the stage. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And it's this whole choir comes out, and they kind of all get lined up. And I realize they're all special needs, the choir. So cool. So this whole choir, they were called the Momentum Choir of special needs people, come out. And then the Bare Naked Ladies come back out on stage, and they start playing the song from their new album that is my son's favorite song. I'm like, oh my God. He's like, Daddy, they're playing my song. I'm like, I know. So I couldn't have scripted it any better. It was just such a wonderful experience. And so me and him are singing along to this song. There's people all around us going like, how does he know the lyrics to this song? It's new. But we just love him. So it was a great experience. So I'm hopeful you guys like the Bare Naked Ladies too. Maybe not as much as me, but right.
Yeah. I mean, if I had $1 million was like a childhood anthem.
I know, and that was the thing. Like that's the song you would expect everyone would love. But the song that me and my son like is called "Love and Life" from their new album. And so, like I say, they did that for their encore with this choir. It was fantastic. So, I guess I was a good dad in doing that. And speaking of that,
for sure,
I also am a good dad when I do this.
Here's your dad joke of the week.
Guys, I figured since we're doing TV cooking shows this week that I would do a nice chef joke, you know, to kick us off on the right foot. All right? So here goes. Why shouldn't you hire a chef? Oh, by the way, did I mention my joke this week is a little un-PC? Sorry. So why shouldn't you never hire a chef? Because the stakes are too high. The stakes are too high because they can't.
I thought it was going to have something to do with being a short order cook, so I'm glad you went in that. Any opportunity to sing a song.
I'm the OG. Yeah, you know me. Yeah, I'm the OG. Yeah, you know me.
There are some huge red flags.
I am the one with the neck full of gold.
For people that listen to this show on like 1.2 or 1.5 times speed, it should be fine.
New movie suck in every single way.
Okay.
Caveman, watch an old movie
over and over and over again.
Derek's documentary.
Well, like I said, it's growing on me.
So, Robbie, as you can tell by that drop, I like to sing once in a while. It's kind of my thing, you know. What can I say? So I want to start off with this TV cooking shows topic, kind of how we got on to doing this. Because a few weeks back, Derek, you mentioned how much you like watching TV cooking competition shows. And Robbie reached out and reminded us that he was a contestant on Chopped. So I thought it'd be a good idea to get him back on the show here to talk all about TV cooking shows. Robbie, do you want to just start us off and maybe just share your Chopped experience with us? Because I had a chance to, I watched it and it just blows me away. So you go on there and they just surprise you with these ingredients. The first round, it was like, here's some like oysters and dried shrimp and dark chocolate. Go. Like, what the hell? So
Yeah,
what was that
something
experience
else,
like,
too.
man?
I can't remember. There was a fourth ingredient, which doesn't matter what it was, but there's 4 things in each round. Yeah, and the like quickest backstory I can get is that I'd opened my restaurant in 2012 in Stratford, Ontario, and the whole theme was I only wanted to use food that was grown or, you know, refined in Canada. I didn't want to be using, you know, black pepper, olive oil, citrus, whatever. I just wanted to really like use what we grow. And a lot of places talk about doing it. I wanted to be as authentic as I could, you know, to a fault. And going on this show was a chance to like just let her loose, right? But at the same time, try to represent some of the stuff we grow in Canada. And I was super nervous because, you know, independent restaurant owner, I can't look like a boob on TV because it could negatively affect. So I was petrified. And the show shot in Toronto at Studio City. So I drove down the night before. There was a Jays game, met my brother-in-law and his, I don't remember if they were married at that point in time. So wife or just about to be wife. And grabbed a drink, had a terrible night's sleep at the Royal York Hotel, woke up into the studio at 6:30 in the morning. They walked us around, and it looks like a kitchen on TV, but the sinks are not plugged into anything. There's like a bucket of water inside a sink if you need water for something. It's, you know, it's as sketch as it could be. And this was season 1 of Chopped Canada, whereas in the States, the Chopped show was already kind of, you know, cemented in at cultural status. So they were expanding it. And yeah, go into the green room, meet the other 3 people that I'm going against the show with. We're all nervous. We're not chatting much. I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. We get the introduction. I think it's Dean McDermott was the host. I looked to see who the chef judges were because I really just wanted it to be people who I would respect their viewpoints because they're going to be critical about what I'm cooking. And Chuck Hughes was there, who I had not personally met, but knew people who had worked for him and spoke highly of him. And Roger Mooking, who was, you know, a TV type personality guy. He'd been on a competition show himself in one. So I didn't really know about his, you know, how good he was with his pan cooking and things like that. And the other chef I didn't know at all. So I was asking the other contestants, you know, who it is. And we were all kind of curious ourselves. We didn't know. Anyway, did the first round, got the oysters and whatnot. And I knew exactly what I was going to do before I showed up. I was forcing myself to do either a soup-based dish or a salad-based dish, because if you don't walk in with a plan and for some reason you panic, you're screwed. You don't have time in that show. So I just immediately went right to my salad, and for my dressing, I'm going to do this. And, you know, you work through it. And then in between rounds, there was probably 2 hours where you're just not sure if you're cooking again or not for the day. And then you stood in front of the judges. They chopped, you know, the person that made the biggest mistakes. And then right away you start, you know, within probably 10 minutes, you're doing your second round. And it was very difficult with that surge in adrenaline and then the drop to like keep it going. And then you mount on top the sleep and the stress and all those things. And what was supposed to be a fun experience was very difficult for me. And after we did the entrees, you put it up and you put your hands up in the air like you see it on the show. Yep. And there was north of 90 minutes between that moment and the judges actually tasting my food and my sauce that I had made, which was a warm aioli or a warm mayonnaise, which doesn't sound appetizing, but when you do it right, you know, it's delicious, acidic, fatty, it split. So it just looked like I had ruined something on the dish, which they talk about. And of course, in editing, they take that out because that's not relevant.
Right.
And I ended up getting chopped in the second round. And then when I watched, I got the cell phone numbers of the guys who were in the final. We were going to get a drink together afterwards. But once I got chopped, I was so pissed. I just drove straight home and told my wife how upset I was over it. But I'd signed these $1 million liability clauses to not say a word until the show had aired. And because no seasons had gone, I had no idea how long it would be. So I think I filmed it 8 or 9 months before it actually aired.
Wow.
And the next day at the restaurant, so it aired the end of January, I think 2014. The next day at the restaurant, which in the dead of winter in Stratford, you are not busy. You know, you do 40 covers at lunch, you're happy. I did north of 100 that day, and people were coming in just to say, you know, how well they thought I had done and how, you know, I got screwed because this guy had, you know, had oyster shell in his. So even though his second course may have looked better, you know, you should have done well. Anyway, it was very supportive. So the whole thing in the end became great, to the point that people had said, you got to put that in your window that you were on Chopped Canada. So I did. And it was such a huge boost for me in the restaurant. I even did themed dinners for quite a while after that. I had contestants that were on the show, like not my episode, but other episodes, who came, and they were like the guest chef, and we cooked for 14 people in the back. And when you came, you brought something that we would then make an impromptu dessert. So we would do the dishes from my episode, the dishes from their episode, and whatever you brought along with the other people that came, we would figure out what in the hell to make with what you guys brought for another final dessert. And it was a ton of fun, and that was really enjoyable, whereas the actual filming was like petrifying because of the, you know, what I saw in my head is like the potential to ruin a business. So
I have a question for you. When you're recording that show, and like you say, there's big breaks in it, the way it's edited, then they usually show you, and they do this on all these competition cooking shows, they'll show the chef talking to the camera saying like, you know, I don't know if this is going to work. Like, you know, I did my best and I really hope. Are you doing that in the moment before you know, obviously, what they're going to do, right? Or how they're going to judge it?
Yeah, none of it is afterwards. There's the exit interview after, which I remember I remember producers trying hard to get me to be a little more jovial. And at the time, I think I was too nervous because, like I said, I thought there was just a lot on the line, but also I had slept poorly and all those things that got in my head, because I had done a taping for them already, and they loved it. And I was trying originally to get on the show Top Chef, which is a show that I loved, but the filming of it conflicted with the opening of my restaurant the year before. So I had to decline, and I was like really down in the dumps because I thought that was the show, right? And then the one producer I spoke to said, I can't tell you what, but there is something else coming down the pipeline that doesn't involve as many days, because you had to be able to commit 6 weeks to be on Top Chef. And for Chopped, it was a maximum of 2 days.
Right.
And I said, yeah, like 2 days, sure. But, you know, so anyway, when that opportunity came for Chopped, I was like, absolutely, I'll happily do it. It looks like a legit competition. But there's always that element when once you learn, I guess if you have to go on the show where you just watch enough of it, you learn the element of the, you know, emotional aspects of the show that need to really hit home. And it's like, oh, it wasn't a cooking competition like I thought it was. It was a cooking competition, but it had a lot of the human element that I genuinely didn't think it would have. And that was the part that I think left the sourest taste initially. But now when I look back at it, like I watched the show last night, found it on the Global app. So anyone in Canada, if you have Global, you can just, you know, punch in the search Chopped Canada season 1, episode 4 is my episode. And you can watch it. And it was so funny to watch how I see myself now, I guess, a decade away from when it was filmed. And my son, who's 8, as I had said to you guys before, he got to watch it last night. And the very first thing he said to me, "Oh, Dad, you look so handsome." And he kept saying it over and over and over. I'm like, what the hell do I look like now? And it was great. And, you know, he said, "Oh, that guy, like, you know, that guy did this and like he'll lose." And I didn't tell him, of course, that I was out second round. So once he saw it, he's like, "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry." And he comes over and hugs me while I'm making our dinner. And yeah, I mean, he's a great kid, but it was such a fun experience to watch it with him. And like, I'm looking at it and like my face is going red, and I'm like, yeah, that was our restaurant. You know, we sold it a long time ago now. And we were very fortunate. You know, we started a small independent business. That opportunity being on the show went very positively for us, even though I did not win. It was an excellent experience. And I know for a lot of other people, it has not been, like various shows where people have complained, but some people have made a career out of competition shows too. Sure. Just like being on them is their competition, you know, is a big part of their career.
Career. I will say this: they got it wrong. I was watching it, and I thought you did really good. It did look like the second round, like, yeah, it had been sitting there for a while too, which I even thought
clearly the food didn't look new at that moment. Yeah.
And they were complaining about how the colors weren't there. I'm like, who cares? Colors I'm not worried about. I'm worried about taste and texture. That's it. And that's all you should be worried about.
If you watch it, Chuck Hughes was like very nice and had good things to say. And the female judge, whose name's now escaping me again, unfortunately, she was the one who seemed critical on TV. She was so nice in the judging, but the way in which they, you know, picked and prodded the show together, they made it seem like she was really negative on it. And then Roger Mooking was the guy who I wasn't too keen on initially. And when the thing was all done, I was like, yeah, I'm not too keen on him anyway. Or, you know, when I walked in, so I'll walk out not too keen on him. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. And overall, helped, but nerve-wracking.
Like
it
I say,
was just one day.
They got it wrong, but it's not the first time. So one of my good buddies is this amazing chef too. His name's Dave Mottershall, and he was on Chopped as well, and he lost in the final round. They got that wrong too. So, and you mentioned Dean McDermott was the host on it. The only thing that guy's known for is marrying Tori Spelling, isn't it?
And that was like at the time stuff was happening, and I believe there was some sort of infidelity or something. Jeez. And it was like between season 1 and 2, he was replaced with I think like a former CFL guy who was on The Bachelor, reality TV based stuff, but it was something like that. So, yeah.
Derek, you're the one that kind of got this whole ball rolling because you like these competition shows. So to talk a little bit, tell me, what is it about these competition cooking shows that you like? And do you also like the instructional shows? Because that's where I want to go next. But so
for me, it's as we've mentioned many times on this show, I love game shows. I think game shows are amazing. I think the older classic game shows really still hold up, and the newer game shows today are not nearly as good. For a number of reasons, which we won't get into right here, right now. We've talked about that before. So I'm always looking for something new that can sort of scratch that itch. And for me, in the last 5 to 10 years, it's been the cooking competition shows. And I think because they're so different than a typical kind of game show. It's not just a test of knowledge where you can play along, which for me, when I first started, like my wife and my brother both watched a lot of these cooking shows, and they were always edging me on. They're like, "You like game shows? You should watch this." And I'm like, "Yeah, but part of what I like about a game show is that I can play along. They ask trivia questions, and I can sort of shout out the answers. Like you watch Jeopardy, you're trying to get the answer faster than they do. With a cooking competition show, it's not like I'm going to be cooking in my kitchen faster than they are. Like, where's the appeal?" But what I've found, part of the appeal for me was the gamesmanship, obviously, of the people who are participating, the chefs themselves, but I'm also learning a lot from it because I'm trying to improve my own cooking skills. And you watch these shows like something like Chopped, where they give them these weird ingredients that I've never heard of. And I end up pausing it and like looking it up. Well, what is that? Or they'll even say, "Oh, this is a vegetable that's only found in this part of the world," or "This is a spice that comes from XYZ that pairs well with this, but we didn't give them this. We gave them something else. Let's see how they figure it out." And it's helped me develop, become a slightly better chef. I mean, I'm still learning. I have a long way to go, but I find that that's part of it's sort of like, how do you make learning fun? Well, for me, this is a way that makes learning fun. I can watch these competition shows and enjoy the challenge aspect of it, like the winning and the losing and the planning and the sabotage in some cases. I find most of the cooking shows, though, are fairly cordial. It's not like some of these other reality competition shows where people can be really cutthroat and deliberately go to the way to sabotage other people. These ones are all very friendly. They're very upbeat. Even they tend to have a lot of the same judges, and they're obviously friendly with each other. And it's like a feel good game show, a feel good competition show. As for instructional cooking shows, not interested. Never have been. They never appealed to me. Even to this day, there's some like more basic sort of cooking shows where it's like, watch a show, learn to cook. I'm not interested. That's just not for me. I need that game show aspect. That's what draws me into these things.
Wow. So obviously when cooking shows first got started on television, they were instructional in nature. And I usually bring the older Gen X and old stuff to this. So my experience of being a Canadian with some of these instructional shows, we're watching things like Walk with Yan. Remember that one?
Yep.
So absolutely, it was,
I think his name was Stephen Yan, and he would like do the thing that I always remembered about that show was he'd have this big wok and he'd be making all this Chinese food. He'd chop everything, and then anything that was left over, he'd slide into this little hole that was on the top. And he used to always say, "That goes down to my brother. My brother's down there." I don't know why that always stuck out to me. I always thought that was pretty funny. And another one that stood out to me too was a show called Celebrity Cooks. This show went from 75 to 85 here in Canada. And they brought in these quote unquote celebrities to cook. And of course, at the time, from 75 to 85, there was precious few Canadian celebrities on TV. So the person that they had hosting this show was Bruno Gerussi, the guy from the Beachcombers. And this was like a big show on Canadian TV for a long time. But that was one I watched a lot. But Robbie, like, you're a chef. Like, when you were growing up, you know, as a kid or like even as a teenager and a young person, did you watch any instructional shows on TV? And if so, which ones?
I absolutely did. So I have organized myself tonight, guys, because I wanted to participate in a positive way. So in my youth, I watched and was inspired by the Muppets because of the Swedish Chef.
Nice.
Dirty.
Awesome. That's awesome.
A special occasion thing that I would watch with my dad, late, usually Friday nights, was the original Iron Chef. So this was not in English, had subtitles.
It was Japanese, right?
Yeah, no idea what in the hell the guys were doing, but I was fascinated by the action and what was going on and in the stadium, cooking, all that stuff. It was intense. Of course, they brought it over when Food Network exploded in the early 2000s, but the original I had watched, and I can safely say that. Not to mention Emeril Lagasse and his big, huge show for Food Network, Emeril Live, which he was the bam guy. He put some spice on it, bam.
Yep.
Anytime garlic was involved, people would clap.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah,
we've been to his
legacy
Delmonico
guy.
restaurant in Vegas many times. It's fantastic.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
it's in the Venetian.
awesome.
It's great.
One of the other ones, and Julia Childs, who I have to say I didn't watch Julia that I remember, but she did do a series with Jacques Pepin, so it was Julia and Jacques. And Jacques Pepin is an incredibly skilled chef. He's, I think, in his 90s now. I was at UMass for a culinary showcasing Canadian cuisine in early April, and we were about 90 minutes away from where his foundation is. And I said, if we have time, I'd really like to try to sneak away in the off chance he'd be there. But more than anything, like, take in a little bit of that history. We didn't end up getting to go, but I often will on YouTube look up Jacques Pepin deboning a chicken. And if you do it, I think the video is like either 9 or 13 minutes. You can see how insanely skilled he is. He takes a chicken, if you want to make it for dinner, debones the thing, makes it look beautiful. I time myself. I can do it in about a minute and a half now. So I get 30 chickens in front of me, and 45 minutes later, I'm done. Station's cleaned up. I'm on to the next job. But you can also take those chickens and stuff them, and you can make all sorts of great things. But he inspired me in that way. Walk with Yan, as well, as you mentioned. Derek, my wife needed me to include Supermarket Sweep, which is not cooking directly, but cooking adjacent. As it is
that one I'm
game show.
with, yeah. Yep.
But it was, it's food, right? They got to go get the food. So in that, they'd go around and the food had various values. And the big argument was always, get the meat, right? Like, the meat's expensive. And now it would be like in Canada, especially, it's like, get a watermelon, because they're insanely priced at the moment. Also, Pasquale, if you do.
Yes, he used to sing. Right?
Yes.
He's like, la, 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 la. He sing like opera and stuff. He annoyed the out of me.
Cooking live in front of an audience, and at the end, he had his plates up and would then serve some to the audience. I did want to also do so. My grandmother on my mom's side, who she passed away when I was in grade 4, 5, or 6, something like that. I was a young guy. I would spend some time with her, and she got me onto Fawlty Towers, which, restaurant, hotel type thing. And my wife was talking to me specifically today about the episode she recalls, which is Cobb salad, where they talk about, with or without raisins is one of the big things in there. And my grandmother was also a big BBC person with Are You Being Served was the other one. But again, that's clothing retail off. And a fun, interesting one is Three's Company. And why does this relate, guys? Yes. Anyone know?
Oh, yeah. Jack Tripper was a chef.
Absolutely. And what did he get? He got the ladies. So right away, you're drawn to that one indirectly, I guess. So, and then the last one, I even have it here. I have the DVD here of, in my youth, I watched the BBC show Chef. And it's a comedy, absolutely hilarious. Well, that was a level, but I'm just looking here to see the cast, if I can find it. But the write-up on it is meet Britain's finest and most ill-tempered chef, Gareth Blackstock, which is Lenny Henry of the prestigious Le Chateau Anglais restaurant. And then it goes on from there. And that show, to me now, is still hilarious. But those were the things that kind of like exposed me to food on the TV side when I was in my youth.
I'm really glad you mentioned Julia Child, because I don't think you can mention TV cooking shows and not mention her. She was always more of an educator and like less of an entertainer, you know, in her style. Yeah. And obviously, like, she's known for bringing French cooking to, you know, American audiences. She was never popular in Europe or anything, just really in the States. The thing I liked about her was that she wasn't like, I don't know if I should use this term, food snob, but you know how like sometimes you hear like they use terms like emulsion and the reduction, and they call peppers capsicum and stuff like that, you know? She didn't do that. Mm-hmm. She'd use like Wonder Bread in her recipes, you know, which I thought was great. And she made the best beef bourguignon ever. Like, she taught me how to make it. So she was good. Do you remember someone named Graham Kerr? This is going way back. Like, we're talking like 60s, 70s.
No.
He was up into the 80s. I don't know how you pronounce it. If it's Kerr, I always thought it was Kerr, but he ended up having a show called Take Kerr, or maybe it was pronounced Care. I don't know. Maybe that's a Scottish way. But this guy was the epitome of the 70s and 80s un-PC mentality. So he started off in New Zealand, and then he moved up here to Canada, and he started the show The Galloping Gourmet. You've probably heard of it. You know, it was like really big. Wow. And so he would be like, he'd be making like a chicken dish, and then he would say like, all right, ladies, let's all throw your breasts into the pan. Like, he would say stuff like he was like totally on PC, and he was known for like using cream and oil and fat and all this stuff. Weight Watchers once called him public enemy number one. This guy. So he was like really well known. Anthony Bourdain. You ever watch him? You ever get into him?
Of course, yeah.
Fantastic, eh?
When I was earning my stripes as a cook, that's when Bourdain became life. His memoir, No Reservations. They made a single season TV show out of it. Bradley Cooper actually starred in it. And yeah, anything him, like the No Reservations, all of it. Like as a young cook, after I read his first book, it's just part of cook culture. Is you earn your stripes by doing all these unseemingly stupid things for the sake of your education, earning your craft within that industry. And he really put it on paper so that you understood that while you're doing these things and staging or not getting paid, working long hours, doing a split shift, this is just a way for you to get better. And he made that on TV for us to see, whether it was like through the docuseries when he traveled, he did all these things, but just, he had such a great way of expressing to the audience that like, this is what, a cook, a chef will do, and this is how they'll see the world. And as someone who was learning at that point, it really helped. Well, I shouldn't say learning, somebody who was continuing to learn at that point, it was really great to be like, okay, good. So the reason I feel this way, I'm not alone. Like, that's okay. Yeah, Bourdain was absolutely somebody that, millions of cooks looked up to.
And so sad. Obviously, he took his own life in 2018. This guy seemed to have it all. Like, he had a successful career, he had fame, money, he had a beautiful wife, Asia Argento, and he hated his fame. He hated being famous. He hated his job. He resented
what he originally wanted.
Yeah, like it was such a shame because he was such an amazing person. I love how he traveled the world, not only to explore international cuisine and culture, but to explore people. You know, he intertwined food and people and culture. Like, he was a pretty amazing guy. So for me, there was two things that sort of changed TV cooking shows forever. You mentioned one of them already, Robbie. The Food Network coming along in the 90s changed everything, and it really took off in the 2000s. But the other one was this for me, was in the summer of 2000, everything changed because this summer replacement show called Survivor came along. Now, what does Survivor have to do with food, right?
Yeah.
Here's
Other
why.
than they wanted rice.
Here's why. Because all of a sudden, in the summer of 2000, scripted TV was just thrown out the window. And everything on TV was a competition. There was a time right after that when pretty much every show was competitive and people were like voted off. Getting voted off the island became a staple in people's conversations. So cooking shows changed forever after that. So did all of TV. But like educational, instructional shows kind of out the window. And it was all about competitions. And that to me was kind of the turning point. Before that, it was all instructional shows. And after 2000, all competitive shows. That's my take on it anyway. So I don't know if you agree with that or not. Derek, you're a competitive guy. Do you know, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, you had that writer strike where suddenly they were looking for anything that was, less scripted. I won't say unscripted, but less scripted so they could get around the guidelines of the union. And you had things like Survivor blowing up. And sure enough, cooking shows, like they're the ultimate form of reality. They're real people cooking real foods, and it's easy for people to relate to that. Something like Survivor is more escapism. I've never been stranded on a desert island, but look at how, the weather and how nice the weather is and the blue oceans and all. Like you can imagine yourself being there, for a variety of reasons. With the cooking shows, it's like, I cook dinner every day. I can relate to that. I can't cook like they can. I don't necessarily have those ingredients, and my kitchen doesn't look like that. At the end of the day, you can relate to it on a very, very human level. And I think that was part of the appeal. Is there's a cooking show for everyone. Are you a baker? Are you a barbecue pitmaster? Are you a stay-at-home mom who makes dinners for 5 kids? Are you a professional chef who cooks at work and at home? Like, there are so many shows out there now that it's like anything else in the internet. You just narrow your searches until you find the one that appeals to you, and you'll find something.
I'm glad that, absolutely, Robbie, you mentioned Iron Chef, because it had been going on in Japan since like 93, whenever it came out. But like I say, once that Survivor craze took hold, then they had to bring this over to America. So they adapted it into, a sort of North American version in 2001. And William Shatner was the chairman. I don't know if you ever saw those ones. He was the chairman? Yes. So when they first brought it over, it was Iron Chef USA. William Shatner was the chairman, and it was like this over the top thing. So needless to say, Shatner was a good chairman for that. But that was one of the first shows, I think, ever to use that secret ingredient. They just reveal it to the contestant. Yes. Like they'd be like, and they do it so over the top too. Like Iron Chef would start to be like, Dungeness crab.
And they lift up the big cover, and there's like the smoke machine all around it. And yes, absolutely. Then they pan to the chef's faces as they're like excited, confused, whatever. Yeah.
So that was one of the first. Another one that I mentioned this one on the podcast previously too. I like Beat Bobby Flay. And here's why I like it. Because, again, the first round of this show, they bring in 2 chefs and they give him a surprise ingredient. He'll just be like, whatever it is. It's shiitake mushrooms. It has to be the star of your dish, and they both have to make it. One of them gets eliminated because, since Survivor, someone's got to get voted off. And then the next round, they go up against Bobby Flay, and they get to pick their signature dish. This is something like they've done their whole life. They've just perfected it. And that's going to be, whatever it is, they might just be like, it's going to be like Scotch egg, something like weird.
Ooh,
and then
that'd be a good one.
Yeah. And then they'll go against him, and so he doesn't know what it is. And then all of a sudden they spring at him. They've had their whole career where they specialized in this one thing. And 99% of the time he beats them. It's like, this guy's so freaking good.
It's interesting that you say that, because I randomly through the Discovery app went to a cooking show. I'm just going to see if I can pull it up real quick to get the name of it. And obviously it's a competition show. They all are. Okay. It's called 24 in 24.
Yep. I'm watching it now.
Are you?
Don't ruin it. I'm one episode.
I'm 20 minutes in. I'm 20 minutes into the first episode. So Derek, you're safe here. But what I found so interesting with it is one of the guys. So there's a guy named Marcel who's in this show, who is one of the guys I kind of alluded to earlier, where he was on Top Chef and since then has been on like 3 or 4 other competition shows. Well, boom, he's on this one too. But the guy that they all go to a table, then they go up, they find out whatever table they went to has an ingredient. They knew the ingredient beforehand. All of a sudden you're cooking against the person who you have the same ingredient with, exactly like Derek, you just said, because of course nothing's new, right? They're all just mishmatching it. And the guy that this Marcel guy is going up against, his brag is that he has beaten Bobby Flay twice.
Wow.
That on the Bobby, beat Bobby
That's
Flay
impressive.
Show. Yeah. And so as you just said, so basically he picked his dish and he was able to execute it twice, which yes, absolutely. That's impressive.
Because Beat Bobby Flay, the thing is, when I watch that show, it highlights the thing that I always say is important: taste and texture. He understands it so well because the judges will eat it and they're like, the taste is so good on this one. The texture's just right.
Okay, I just wanted to say, because we just mentioned Bobby Flay, that my wife wants me to spread awareness on television programs that empty coffee cups on all shows, but particularly Law and Order SVU, ruin her enjoyment of the show. And then she tells me, which then ruins my enjoyment of the show. And that Bobby Flay was married to one of the ADAs that was on the show, and he was actually in an episode of Law and Order SVU, and he was a victim of something nasty happening to him as the opening scene of one of the shows. Obviously, they didn't show the act, but Bobby Flay rules the world, right? And that's he at his height, I guess, of TV show. He was on Law and Order SVU.
Nice. My son has 2 cookbooks signed by Bobby Flay. He's so happy about that. So
nice.
Another thing I wanted to mention about is there has been a slight change recently, thank goodness, away from those 2 formats. And there's shows where they travel around to like local places that specialize in certain things. Like Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives is a big one with Guy Fieri. And there's a Canadian show called You Gotta Eat Here.
Of course there is.
You know. And those 2 shows I kind of like because it highlights these kind of mom and pop shops, these smaller places that just have one thing that they just specialize in, or they just do so better than everybody else. I enjoy those ones. Robbie, you know what I'm talking about, these shows?
So within the evolution of Food Network, in 2007-8, they were filming a show in Stratford called Chef School. You can go watch it. It's on Tubi. I randomly saw that it was on there today. And they filmed it in 2006, 7 or 7, 8, whatever it was. And then it aired the following, year delay. I took a job at a pub in Stratford where they were filming this show. And it was a docu-series. And the idea was to show this private chef school in Canada and the people that come to it, and they're training not to be, a cook in the industry. They're training to be chefs, right? Like they're highfalutin types and da-da-da. But then the people that they had, their subjects, were on the whole kind of like your typical line cook bum, not your class of prestigious graduates. But they showed what actually happened within it. And at that same time, culinary schools, because of the Food Network, were exploding with people who were like, I want to be a chef like they are on TV, right? Like they saw that. And I had already been cooking, and I was back in school to do my apprenticeship and under a different umbrella of, culinary learning than people who graduated high school and then went off. But they were watching all of these cooking shows, like you were just describing, the competition shows in Canada. We had Baking with Anna Olson, who, I went to her bakery once and I got nervous and didn't talk to her. And like my wife just like to this day talks to me about, remember when you were too scared to talk to Anna Olson? I'm like, would you just leave me alone, woman? But anyway, the marriage is fine, guys. And Michael Smith, Chef at Home, Chef at Large, like you said about
Chef at Home was one of my favorite instructional shows.
Absolutely love that show.
Totally
love that show. I
improvise.
So I would sit there, sit there with a notepad, and I would write down. Okay, he did this. Okay, he did that. I learned, and then Jamie Oliver had the same thing. Where Naked Chef was when he was a very young guy. Obviously, he wasn't naked, like the bare naked ladies are not naked, or ladies. But that was like the draw, was you would watch him like just cook bare ingredients, like the bare necessities. And then he's ballooned up and since then done all these things. And then it was like the angry chef, right? And that's when Ramsay, Gordon Ramsay, right. Kitchen Nightmares, Hell's Kitchen was all. And then everyone's like, wow, like he's horrible but also fascinating. Who trained him? And then they learned about this guy, Marco Pierre White, who's the guy that trained Ramsay. And Marco Pierre White is like a chef, like a legend who understands. He gave back. There's this thing called Michelin stars, awarded to like the most highfalutin restaurants. 1 star is like a great place doing whatever they're doing to an excellent level. 2 is like worth a detour to go and visit the place, and 3 is worth the trip. So you plan your trip to go and have this dining experience. Well, he was a 3 Michelin star chef. He gave his stars back because of like the politics and things behind how they were doing things. Like he didn't believe in some of the other people, I guess, that had stars of his, caliber. But anyway, all those things were all like instead of just being in the ether or being in a book, all of a sudden it was on TV. And as a result, all these like kids were like, I'm going to go be a chef. And then they all kept coming into kitchens that I worked in. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this isn't like, they'd show up with all these gadgets, the gimmick things. And it was fascinating to like see it. And you're like, did you see the new kid? When I worked at like a fine dining restaurant, like, have you seen this guy? And like, oh yeah, like I give him 3 weeks. And that would happen, right? Like they couldn't do it because they'd been watching television, like, everybody that watches TV and thinks whatever happens, they can do. And that, I blame the Food Network, but at the same time, I thank the Food Network because shows like the ones I mentioned taught me things that I wasn't able to learn in a kitchen when I was just doing whatever the chef of that kitchen told me to do. TV shows were like, hey, here's a little reprieve, right? Anna Olson's like, you don't bake at work. Here you go. You can watch what I do at home and do that if you want to.
Derek, anything that we haven't talked about you want to get to before I get to my last one here?
No, I mean, from a broad conversational piece, we've sort of hit all the high points. The only thing I sort of want to add is just throw in a couple of shout outs to a couple of the ones that I enjoy that we haven't really mentioned yet. So we already talked about Chopped. You mentioned Diner Drive-Ins and Dives and Guy Fieri. He's also got the Guy's Grocery Games, which is one that I really love, also known as Triple G. And part of what I love about that, because the show's been on the air since 2013, they've done so many episodes. They have like specific kinds of competitions that they do within each of the episodes. And so when the contestants come on, I would like to think most of them have seen the show before, and they're like, oh, this time we're doing budget battles. You have $18 to buy everything you need. And so like the contestants know what's coming. So that's part of what I really like about a lot of these cooking shows is when they give them like what they call the whammy ingredients, or they give them like limitations on what they can't. You can't shop in aisles 5 and 9, but you have to make a this and a that, which are normally in aisles 5 and 9. So figure out a way around it. So Guys Grocery Games is one that I just love tremendously. The 24 and 24 Last Chef Standing that we were just talking about, for those who might be interested, it's just aired. Like I think that the finale is coming up this week, and it's literally they brought in 24 chefs and they're making them cook straight through for 24 hours. It's 24 challenges over the course of the 24 hours where people continue to get eliminated, and part of what they earn as their rewards along the way are breaks. So it's adding like a whole new level to cooking competitions, unlike anything I've ever seen. And they keep touting that. They're like, we've never done this before, and it's so great. I'm really enjoying it. It's a lot of fun to watch. And then one of the other ones that sort of got me into this was a show called The Barbecue Pitmasters. It was on
with Rob. Is that correct, or is that no? Sorry, I was just thinking the Food Network Canada one.
No, this was
Pitmasters. So various
Barbecue
guys.
Pitmaster. Yeah, it was Myron Mixon, I think, was the main judge. 2009, 2015, and I love this show because again, I'm not a great cook, but I've always used the barbecue a lot. I mean, here in Canada, we use the barbecue all year round, whether it's snowing or not. And so I liked that was one of the first sort of cooking competition shows where I actually felt I was learning a lot by watching it, and just the personalities of some of these chefs, and just getting to understand the idea of like competitive pitmaster barbecue, like going to these like rib fests on the weekend and stuff, and seeing how that part of cooking culture works, because I wasn't really that familiar with it until I started watching this show. And now I keep my eyes open all summer long when they're like, there's a festival coming through in your neighborhood, it's barbecue festival, rib fest. It's like, I'm there. Like, these things are amazing. So it's that combination of seeing these entertaining cooking competition shows and experiencing them from the comfort of your own home, but also in some cases, you know, like the Barbecue Pitmasters got me interested in going to, like, you know, rib fests and things like the diners, drive-ins, and dives, and you got to eat here. Like, they'll often feature someplace, and you're like, oh, that's not far from here, or oh, we're going there soon. We should make a point of doing that. And one of the things that they constantly talk about is how the proprietors of these restaurants, like you talked about earlier, Robbie, they you know, there's a real dollars and cents benefit that comes out of being on these shows, and like they're very far reaching. Like the people that watch these shows, they can really be influenced heavily. They see the right thing on your show where they're like, oh my God, that looks amazing. Like, they'll go out of their way to eat there. So it's just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of these shows that I enjoy.
I got one last one I want to mention. And so, Derek, you like game shows. And so I want to mention this one because it's not really a cooking show. It does have a cooking element to it, but it is a game show. And as a kid, it was one of the first times I was ever exposed to, like, cooking on TV. So
I know where you're going. Yeah, go.
This show was called Just Like Mom.
Yep.
Oh my God!
Remember that?
My wife was like, "You got to tell them about that show," and I have no idea what the hell she's talking about.
So,
wait, please, sorry.
Okay, so it was hosted by Fergie Oliver, and Fergie Oliver used to do the Jays games back in like the 70s and early 80s, and so he hosted the show with his wife. And remember when Richard Dawson used to host Family Feud back in like the late 70s, early 80s? And he would kiss all the women. It was like he was like a lech. It was just so awful.
Chris, I literally watched an old episode of a Richard Dawson Family Feud today on Pluto TV, and I was grossed out by how he was kissing all the women multiple times.
They've now put them on Pluto TV. So I've been watching them as well. Those old episodes of
that's
Richard
just
Dawson.
called being a good host. Yeah. Right? A good host.
So that was one thing. Richard Dawson kissing all the women on the show. It's just the guy's a lech. Well, so this show Just Like Mom with Fergie Oliver. The thing was, this is the concept of the show. There'd be like a mom on the show with her kid, either her son or her daughter, usually daughters. It was like little girls. And Fergie Oliver used to kiss all the little girls. Like,
gross.
On the lips. Like we're talking like 6-year-old girls. It was just like friggin' awful. But anyway, that aside, the creepiness of Fergie Oliver aside, the idea was they would do like, the kid would go backstage and then they would ask the mom questions and then they'd bring the kid out and see if they could match the questions and the answers to get points. But then in the last round, they would have cooking. And so what they would do is the kids would go into the kitchen and they would cook something. And they might be like, today we're going to do chocolate chip cookies. Okay. And the kids would all there'd be like 3 kids. There'd be 3 sets of like kids and parents. And they would make cookies. And then the idea was then the moms had to they got 3 cookies in front of them. They had to eat them and pick which one was their kid made it. But the kids would put like ketchup and like
was always
mustard
in one of them.
And like mayonnaise into the cookies. It was like just disgusting. And the moms would take one bite and like almost like vomit them out and like spit them into like napkins and stuff like that. But it was just like, it was one of the first times where I was ever exposed to like cooking on TV as a kid. I was watching this and like, oh my gosh. So I had to mention that. So Robbie, your wife knows this show. She'd heard of it.
Yeah, and she insisted because I said to her, I'm like, I'd like to sit down and kind of talk about the shows because sometimes you just forget, right?
Yeah.
I think even like core parts. And I said, I want to sit down, with you and go through cooking shows. And of course, she fell asleep. So today she's like, this show and this show and this show. And I was like, okay, great. And I wrote down that I needed to mention Just Like Mom, 80s Canadian show. Mm. And she said exactly what you said, was that it was the moms had to try the food and guess like whatever their recipe was, and then the kids would always muck it up, which is like hilarious that they did that kind of thing. One of the other ones that is interesting, and I don't know if you guys recall this, it's called Come Dine With Me. So it's
heard of that. It sounds familiar, but I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, basically it's 4 cocky people who think they're really good at hosting and cooking, invite people to their home, and then they host a dinner party at which they cook at. And the other 3 people that you invite over rate you 1 out of 10. And whoever wins gets, I don't know, something minimal. But you go to the homes and they film in the homes and they do all this stuff. And it's cringe-worthy, but also like train wreck can't look away. Nice. Because some people are good at it, but most of them are not. And that's where it gets to be interesting. We're like, they took forever with the thing and they didn't replace the drinks and something was burnt. And, Derek said someone's grilling in January outside. So although the meat may or may not have been cooked, it was cold, like whatever all those interesting scenarios within that competition too, but you don't know the scores until the very end. And some people could like sandbag it and be like, really like down talk their skills and ability to their group, but in secret they're like, oh, I know how to cook. And then you're like, all right, I can't wait to watch this guy, mess this up. And you could also intentionally give somebody a low score, which the odd person would do just to try to increase their own odds of winning. But typically that person showed their true colors, throughout, and like no one liked them or something like that. And on the other end of it, on like it's still up to date right now, Derek, I think you would like this show, Master Chef UK. So it's one that
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I've been able to like search it and find it to watch it, for free. but I can't find, it's not a streaming thing that I've been able to find. But there are some chefs that I work with who are like, that's the show right now. You know, that's the one that they enjoy watching in their free time. And it is good. And they get talented people, and they are talking about, you know, the emulsifications, as you talked about earlier, Chris, and all the, you know, the fluid gels and cooking things sous vide, and the things chefs can like, not all, but some chefs can like, but they also get into like overnight cooking and, you know, low temperature things. And it's an excellent show. And my final one here, and it's relevant to these days. Now, it's not a show that I enjoy watching, but it is hard to stop my son from watching the show. Is It Cake?
Oh,
Netflix.
yes. I've seen that too.
So
it's like a shoe.
Yes.
And you cut it and it's cake. Yeah.
I watched one episode and I felt dumber every minute it was playing.
And like, it does, in theory, you're like, that's stupid. But if you had a purse and then were told, go make a cake that looks like a purse, you can, I mean, you don't need to like the show, but you would respect the skill set that it takes for these people to work with. I know it's fondant in the end of the day, like it's icing, you know, sugar water, whatever, but the skill set to do that is very high. And sometimes reality shows don't get to show people as like the true skills, or show their true skill set. But on this show, on the good days, you know, Mikey Day, who's on SNL, is the host of it. I heard him talking on I forget what it was, Late Night with Seth Meyers, I think. And he said he gets more recognized from kids as are you the Is It Cake guy than he does for SNL with adults or anything like that. Yeah. And I'm like, well, you know, judging from my son's reaction, yes, that would happen too. But it's an entertaining show, and I'll leave it at that. The skill set's high on the people, but again, you're making, you know, a purse look like a purse, or a football, a cake look like a football, something like that. So.
Awesome conversation, gentlemen. What do you say that we have some
fun with Caveman?
So, Robbie, you've been on Chopped. You obviously like competition shows, but I have a question for you. Do you like game shows?
I can't wait. My knives are sharp. Let's do this.
All right, because you're about to take a seat in the winner's circle of the $100,000 pyramid. So you've got to go up against the pyramid, and you got to name 6 things. Okay, I'm going to be giving you clues along the way. Now, I can only give you clues in the form of a list. Okay, so one common thread that we're going to have here, though, all the categories are food related in some way. Just to want to keep consistent with our theme this week. Okay, so if you make it all the way to the top of the pyramid, you know, by getting all 6 things correct, you're going to win the ultimate food prize. It's a gift certificate for a free Big Mac. Okay.
I was hoping you'd just pay for a beer at a Jays game, but all right, sure.
All right, well, I'll do that. So, ready? Go. McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell.
Fast food?
Yes. Risotto, pilaf, paella.
Rice.
Yes. Enchiladas, burritos.
Mexican food.
Yes, very good. Hot dogs, sausages with sauerkraut, corn dog, empanada, funnel cake.
Things you'd eat at a fair? Things you'd eat at a ball game?
Hot dogs, in New York, sausages with sauerkraut.
Oh my goodness, I'm blanking on this. I don't
Downtown
know.
sausages, downtown hot dogs.
Street meat.
Yes. Okay. Corn on the cob, popcorn, fruit, like a whole apple, pizza.
Things at a fair?
No, corn on the cob.
Yeah.
Popcorn.
Things you use your hands.
Yes. Coffee. Unmixed coffee. James Bond's martinis. No, non-James Bond's martinis.
Is this shaken, not stirred?
Yes, stir. They just stir. Oh my God. That one was maybe my my clues weren't very good. I was trying to think like.
No. You did great.
Oh.
I was thinking like things at a location, but I wasn't thinking the street at 2 a.m.
That's why I was trying to think like that is from New York, in the city.
Yeah, which is that was the clue that helped me with it. Was you said New York, I'm like, all right, different town. Yeah.
Robbie, I just want to say thanks, man. Thanks for coming back. Where can everybody find you these days?
You got two options, really.
Okay.
You can. I'm podcasting, fantasy baseball podcasting with the Palazzo podcast. As the tagline for the show is 2 L's, 2 Z's, because in Canada we pronounce it Z, not Z.
Mm-hmm. With Michael Govier, our good friend.
With Michael Govier, friend of the show. Yeah,
great guy.
I do the Prospect Power Hour with an excellent baseball mind, Benjamin Chase. And you can also check out UW Food Services on Instagram. And inspired by you, Chris, I do a version of dad jokes on the Instagram account when they let me do what they call takeovers. I'm using air quotes, everybody. And we do some horrific comedy on that in the kitchen. It's all chef stuff.
Right.
We're in our whites. We're doing our thing. But those are the two spots.
You're more than welcome to use my dad joke from earlier in the show.
No, I don't think that one's going to make the cuts.
I didn't think it was
exactly inclusive.
If you use that one, use my punchline. I think it was better.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
The punchline wasn't the problem in that joke. It was the setup.
That's also true, Chris. That's also true.
So Robbie, thanks for coming and joining us again. You're a great guy. It's always great to have you come back. You can come back anytime. You're going to come back again, right?
I mean, I'd love to. You let me know, and we'll do it again in 4 years, maybe, right?
It's been like 3.5 years since you've been on. We'll have you back sooner, I promise. Next week, Derek. Derek, I also want to mention, you're also known as Caveman, right? It's an affectionate nickname that you've had for years, Caveman.
Yes.
So it's over to me to pick a movie for us to go back and watch and review for next week. So we're going to go back. We're going to go way back to the age of dinosaurs, Caveman. You and I are going to watch Caveman, the 1981 film starring none other than Ringo Starr.
Ringo Starr.
Yes.
Nice.
So it's very easily available. It's available on Tubi. It's streaming. It's for free. So we're going to watch Caveman, and we're going to come back next week, and we're going to review that film. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Should be a lot of fun. But until then, I'm Chris McBrien, you're Derek Myers, and we want to say thanks a lot for taking the time to listen to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.